Hello, and welcome to the Talented Amateurs podcast. My name is Joe Randolph, your host, and today we have Cynthia Daniels. She is the Chief Event Strategist for Cynthia Daniels and Company, and she's been featured in the national publications like the Black Enterprise, Essence Magazine, and under Cynthia Daniels and Company, it's a full service event planning and design company that specializes in executing large scale operations and social events. Under the umbrella, she's created 7 signature events, including Memphis Black Restaurant Week, which has brought in more than $1 million in the minority owned restaurant community since 2016. Cynthia is a native of Atlanta, my home state of Georgia, and currently resides in one of my favorite cities, Memphis, Tennessee. And so I'm definitely excited for this conversation and today's guest, and really interested to hear our conversation. And I think you guys in the audience will have a pleasure just hearing her story and some of the things that she's doing in the Memphis and the Atlanta community. So with that, let's get started. Cynthia, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Joe. I'm super excited to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your story. As we get started, we'll go through the conversation. And as things come up, we'll obviously have an opportunity to touch on a various multitude of topics. But as we get started, let's maybe just start off with who is Cynthia Daniels, and just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. So Cynthia Daniels is a person, like you mentioned, I'm an Atlanta native, so I am very much a very chill, behind the scenes type person. I love creating cool things. I don't want to do the exact same events that everybody's seen. So I always challenge myself, whether it's one of my 7 signature events, to do something out the box or something for one of my clients. I really like to stand out from everybody else. So, I'm somebody, when you come to me, you're going to get the unexpected.
Very good. So you're doing event planning now, and you started your company. Tell us a little about your background. How did you get started? How did you end up in this space
Yeah.
in terms of event planning?
It's a funny story and very unexpected, Joe. I actually have a background in HR, and my lifelong career goal was to become an HR director of a, Fortune 500 company. But that plan was interrupted by the economic downfall in 2008. I finished college, 2 degrees. I was working my first job in Atlanta, Georgia, in 2008 because I was the last person hired at this company. I was the first person they let go, when things started to take a turn for the worse. But of course, at that time, I thought, well, I have 2 degrees, no problem. I'll get hired the next day. But what nobody told us is that when you're coming out of college, you still need experience, right, to land the job. So here I am interviewing with everyone else that's been laid off during that time. And a year passed, and I still could not find anything in HR. So I decided to take a chance and just try a new city. When you're not working, that's the perfect time to just start new routes somewhere else. You have nothing to lose. So had a college friend in Memphis, Tennessee. I researched Memphis. Memphis had a lot of great opportunities. It birthed, and it's the home of FedEx. And everybody knows FedEx Corporation, Holiday Inn. That was something I learned very early on. So a lot of entrepreneurs started amazing businesses in the city of Memphis, Tennessee. So I thought, let me move here. Moved here. Within 2 weeks, I found a job in HR. So I thought, okay, I can do this thing for 2 years. But the thing that was a little different with this job, Joe, was that I was working in a distribution center. Memphis is the distribution hub of the South. Again, we have FedEx. So a lot of warehouses, a lot of companies around transportation, they really do start their roots in the city of Memphis. Well, it's one thing to work in corporate in HR, and you're dealing with conflict resolution, you're dealing with, connecting with new companies, recruiting, the newer candidates out of their college backgrounds. But in the distribution center, you're dealing with employees that are making minimum wage. They typically only have high school diploma if they graduated high school. And the type of issues I dealt with, let's just say I was getting called a lot because of fights at 2, 3 in the morning and having to call the police. So I said, you know what, this may not be the company for me, right? And at the same time, I knew I was still new to the city. I didn't want to just jump and leave. So I decided to find out what were the people like me after hours, right? So I started networking like crazy, volunteering like crazy, Joe. And I became that super volunteer on the weekends that joined committees, just stumbled across Memphis Urban League Young Professionals, where I really got my event planning roots, and just being the leader in those committees and learning how to fundraise, learning how to plan on the side. So once I started focusing more on my volunteer responsibilities than my day-to-day role, I knew that event planning was kind of my thing. So that's really, I discovered it in Memphis. I never had a desire for event planning before moving here.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great story. And and tell us more about the transition from Atlanta to Memphis, right? And having
Okay.
come to Memphis a few times, obviously working with you and
Yeah.
in the urban league capacity,
Mhm.
I really one of the unique things I found about Memphis is a lot of people come home. You see a lot of people in their hometowns. They leave, they go get educated, and then they go and transition to other cities.
Right.
But one of the unique things I noticed about Memphis that people come home, and to your point, you said there's a lot of businesses there. So you see a lot of people starting businesses, becoming entrepreneurs, and also running for office, which is a great thing to see because you want that hometown feel when people are running because they understand the needs of the community. But tell us about that transition from Atlanta to Memphis, and what was that experience like? And what have you realized about being in Memphis that allowed you to
Mhm.
kind of make this transition?
It's very interesting. And I have to preface this with Atlanta is home. I love Atlanta forever. So no shade as you hear the story, right? But
Absolutely.
Memphis is very soulful. The people here are a real community. They're very connected. And the one thing I can say when I first moved here, and you feel like a big fish in a small pond, right? Memphis is a lot smaller than Atlanta. But as soon as I would tell people, hey, I'm not from here, immediately they want to take me under their wing. Well, let me introduce you to this person and this person. You need to be a part of this organization. You need to go to these committee meetings. You need to go to the commissioners' meetings, get involved. I mean, Memphis really cares about their community. So that's the biggest difference that I saw. Again, I moved here in about 2009. So in terms of developments in the downtown scene, it was still up and coming, which now I've been here 11 years, Joe. So my plan has changed, right?
Right.
This city really sees a lot of entrepreneurs come here with a lot of funding. We've got Epicenter, we've got Start Code that really bring in people from all over the country to do a lot of tech companies. It's just a really great opportunity. And there's an article published by Black Enterprise that said Memphis is a hub for female entrepreneurs. So I moved here not even knowing the opportunity that lied before me.
Awesome. That is great to hear. And so maybe let's talk about that entrepreneurship, and particularly as you mentioned, it's a home where you see a lot of Black women entrepreneurs and it's growing. And so you started this journey into getting into starting your own business. What prompted that decision, and how did you know it was the right time?
The funny thing, Joe, as much as I enjoy event planning as my side hustle, even working in corporate, I never thought I'd do this full time. It was just something to do, something for the community. I really felt connected with Black businesses. That's something that comes from Atlanta, right? In Atlanta, I mean, between the Black mayors that I grew up seeing, the Black business owners, I knew that was important to seek out in the Memphis community. So, I did a lot of events through different organizations, but my first event really was just a passion project. I didn't think I'd make any money, but it was Memphis Black Restaurant Week. And we'll talk about that, I know, a little bit later, but the fact that I was able to create this amazing event that brought in so much money to these restaurants, got national attention, and I was doing it with a 9 to 5 job. It was at that moment I recognized, you know what, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be making a difference in my community. Um, Economic empowerment, I've always personally been for that, but it was really time for me to help people see that in Memphis. I would say that as much as I do love Memphis, we're still a few decades behind when it comes to uplifting our own. Now, we support local, we're a community, but something about putting Black on something, it makes us nervous. I don't know what that is.
Interesting. Let's maybe dive into that. Why do you think that is still the case? Because you see that, you see Black businesses thriving in other cities,
Yeah,
and Memphis is a Black city. Why do you think that is the case? And what do you think will help make that transition to more of a progressive, more
yeah,
acceptance, and just more, support for the Black businesses in that area?
sure. I will tell you exactly what happened. I'm very much one that's into our of our history, and I think most people, when they hear Memphis, they think about the death place of Dr. King, that he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel. I think a lot of growth stopped in 1968. A lot of Coca-Cola was supposed to be headquartered here, something I learned very early on moving here. A lot of decisions and a lot of companies left after that particular incident. So unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, my generation and generation after that, their parents are still telling them that story. And it's almost as if we can't do anything. You know, don't get too big, don't be too loud, just stay in your lane, work your job. So I think the fact that I come here from Atlanta saying, well, why don't the Black businesses have this? Why don't we have a Black festival? Why don't we have Black galas? It scares some people. And for me, it's all I know coming from Atlanta. So I think that it goes back to Dr. King. Unfortunately, the 1960s, that mindset still is here with some of the Memphis citizens.
Wow, that's very interesting, Al. And I think with people like yourself and some of the work that I'm seeing there with some of the other young entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
I think Memphis can make that shift. Now, you transition from HR into event planning. What
Yeah.
has that transition been like? Are there any transferable skills that's allowed you to make this transition successfully, where you can use some of your skills in HR where now
Mhm.
you're applying it to your event planning space?
You know, I've thought about this a lot, and I think the biggest thing, Joe, that makes me different as an event planner because I have an HR background is my ability to communicate with people. You know, as event planners, it's very fast paced. You've got your team you have to deal with. It's crazy hours. You've got vendors. You've got things that are going to go wrong every event. And I have volunteered with event planners in the past. They're usually very loud, very brass, using profane language. I mean, you're walking on eggshells working with event planners, but at the end, you've got this beautiful end result of this magical thing they've created. On event day, people ask me, Cynthia, are you even okay? Like, are you aware that we've got 1,000 people coming tonight? And for me, it's yes, I've planned it. I've already delegated the plans to my team, things that I've had to do in an HR capacity. If something goes wrong, I know how to talk to you to where you don't feel like I've talked to you in such a demeaning way. You feel empowered. And that's something that I learned in HR, that you get the best results out of people when you communicate with them in the best way possible. So I think that also just has helped me in terms of my relationships and my reputation in the event planning space here.
Awesome. And I think a lot of people, when they think about wanting to either shift careers or wanting to get into something new, why do you think it's important for them to understand what those transferable skills are? Because a lot of times they think they have to go get new skills or have to develop. They probably will. You have to always develop
You
new
do. You
additional
do.
skill sets, but there's things you
Yeah.
can apply from previous roles or experiences that will allow you to kind of duplicate and allow you to at least transfer some of that over. Why do you think people miss kind of those opportunities and kind of boggle, hinder
Mhm.
themselves from taking those steps?
Well, I think a lot of people undersell themselves. You have to number one, you have to know what you're good at. You have to write down your trades that naturally come to you, because that's what's going to make you successful regardless of what field you're in. I think people have to be, they try to be so technical. Well, I have to get this certificate and take this class. It's not about that. It has to be within you. So you have to know that whatever you decide to do in a transferable way, that it just makes sense. So again, for me, I'm somebody that I like to be around people. I like to communicate. I like to uh, be creative. So of course that's something I had to do in HR, so it worked well in the HR space. So I think people don't even take the time to pinpoint what they're good at. They just say, well, I want to jump in this career, so I'm just going to take these classes. And it still may not be a good fit.
Got you. Now, let's maybe talk more about the event planning and
Okay.
and and a lot of people don't understand why they need an event planner or what the importance is of an event planner. And can
Yes.
you can you maybe just share with us, why are event planners so important in the role that they play to help enhance the experience versus me planning an event and trying to do everything myself? And so let's talk about that, because I think a lot of people
Sure.
don't understand the profession and the career, but they really do play a role in making the
Right.
experience of the event go either in a very positive way in a memorable experience, or it could go in a way where people may not have the best experience. So talk to me about what is that and what's the importance of those event planners and so forth.
Absolutely, Joe. And you said two key words. So you said planner and you said experience. So number one, a planner is someone that comes with years of experience. If you're coming to me as a client, I'm able to make this process as easy as possible, right? So when you want your finances right, you go to a financial advisor. When something's wrong in a medical way, you go to a doctor. So let the event planner help you make this the best experience possible. I'm able to save you on time. Time is money. At the end of the day, why would you want to take on trying to plan a party, a wedding, when you already have a full-time job? I can come in, I have relationships with vendors. I know how to maximize your budget. I know how to work with the right businesses. I have relationships with rental companies. So you're bringing in this professional. I'm just not a planner on paper, but I'm bringing in all of these years to just make it easier for the client. Also, for the actual people that are coming to the event, I already have a team in place. So instead of you trying to call your friends, your mama them and your cousins, can y'all, pass out programs? Can you help me set up? I have a team that's already in place that can do those things for you. If any type of issues go wrong, I'm already 10 steps ahead of it. I'm always making sure it's a smooth, very flawless night. So planners, at the end of the day, you may not want to spend the money, but it's an investment. It's just going to give you peace. It's going to save you time at the end of the day.
So what is your approach? Each experience is different. Each
Yes.
client is different. What is your approach in really being able to understand the unique needs of each client so you can really understand the type of experience you want to create for them? What is that creative process like?
The first thing I do, I never like to talk money. I think a lot of event planners, when they come in, okay, well, what's your budget? What are you willing to spend? How many people do you want to come? I want to paint the picture first. I need the client and I to be on the same page. Give me the visual. So the first question I ask, tell me about this event. What do I feel like as soon as I pull up in the parking lot? Because the event starts in the parking lot. If I can't immediately find parking, if there's not a valet person to take my keys instead of me having to spend all this time around in the parking lot, it starts there. So again, save a lot of time and money just thinking about what that experience looks like when picking a location. So now you walk up to the door. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Now tell me about every hour. One thing with some event planners, Joe, they just think about, okay, oh, you want to have a party? Okay, it's going to be from 8 to midnight. No, tell me what every hour looks like. Because if I'm there all night, I need every hour to elevate. So by the end of just the visualization exercise, the client, I've already sold the client on this event. They're like, if you can make all this happen, where's the contract? So I've learned that technique helped me. And it also makes me think back to my HR. Maybe that's kind of when we had to do employee investigations, I had to do a lot of storytelling and listening. So that's an aha moment for me, Joe. Thank you. Like maybe that's where even that comes from, right?
Wow. And the storytelling, that is a very interesting concept, and
Yeah,
and you're starting to hear more. It's not necessarily about the just the customer experience. It's
right.
about how do you tell that story, and why is that important as you talk about the events and being able
Yeah,
to tell that story, because I think it's important, and a lot of people don't understand or grasp the importance and the concept
right.
of storytelling.
Yeah, you build a bond with your client. You leave a lasting impression on the people that came to the event. So being able to take that story from that initial meeting, being able to have them feel that story throughout the evening, it's important because it also just lets you know that you're hearing your client and you're thinking about what the customer needs to experience at the end of the day. So storytelling is not about going and telling people what they think they need. It's about listening to what they want.
Awesome. And you mentioned obviously the one of the things that you bring to the table in your event planning experience through Cynthia Daniels and Company is the team that you bring with you and around you. So what is your process of really building your team, and what do you focus on in terms of creating the right group
Sure.
around you so you can execute effectively?
I'm glad you said that, the right team, because I absolutely started with the wrong team. I had two sets of wrong teams before I got it right. So initially, like I just said earlier, Joe, I very much relied on volunteers because I was a volunteer and I learned my passion for event planning. So I thought, well, surely if number one, I didn't have the money to pay people, but surely I would find other Cynthia Daniels that could, volunteer with me. Well, what I found was that people weren't passionate about volunteering. They just wanted to get into the event for free, right? So they would get there, they would set up. I look up after a few minutes and they've disappeared into the crowd. So after a few events, getting that wrong, I realized, okay, I don't need volunteers. It's not worth it. Let me pay people. Well, I thought, well, as an up and coming event planner, let me hire and subcontract other event planners. What I found, Joe, was creating this, super team of event planners. They're trying to outplan me. They're not teachable. They're coming in thinking, well, this is how I would do this, and this is how I would do it, instead of this is what Cynthia Daniels wants. So I learned early on, okay, I don't need to hire my peers. So what I decided to do was have a more extensive process and just learning people that love events. I went to different colleges. We have 4 colleges in the city of Memphis. So going into the hospitality departments, learning, students that were, rock stars in their classes. They have even internship programs. So I really learned to go younger. It's nothing wrong. I didn't think I wanted to mentor in the beginning. I just wanted to kind of pick up and go. But mentoring is really the absolute best way to go when building a team, because at the end of the day, as much as I continue to grow my business, represent my business in the sales department, then I can really have that event planner take my place and allow me to grow as a business owner. So having the right team means you got to still take time to pour into that person and teach them along the way, and not just expect everybody to have it as soon as they get started.
No, and I actually love that you're going into the schools and creating opportunities for students, particularly if students of color. Because one of the
Yeah.
things when they're coming out, if they're not able to get the internships, and it makes it harder to get and land jobs in their career because they don't have the relevant experience. And I really love that you're going in and reaching back and helping them bridge that gap from their junior, senior years into when they graduate, and then they can actually speak to, hey, I
Right.
actually do have this experience, right, that I can bring to
Right.
the table. And I think that's great. And even those strategic partnerships with the universities is key. And I definitely see a Cynthia Daniels course, at one of these universities in the future. So maybe that's something to
Okay.
think about.
I'll take
But
that.
but that's great to hear. And I think the one thing I also want to maybe piggyback on is there's multiple roles that happen when you're planning an event. Maybe tell us about the different roles, because a lot of people think they have to be the main event planner, but there's
Right.
other roles that are key in
Mhm.
helping drive and execute a successful event. Can you tell us more about just the multitude of roles that you have to have in order to create a very unique and rewarding experience for your clients?
Absolutely. So the first thing that's very important that I learned early on, so you have event planners and you have event designers. So I'm an event planner. I'm somebody that focuses on logistics. The bigger, the better. I like to think about every minute detail when it comes to an event. An event designer is someone that likes to come in and make things pretty, flowers, the linen, the everything that sparkles, right? So you have to determine who is interested in that, right? Because if it's not me, then who do I need to delegate that to? You also need to have somebody that's really good with critical thinking, kind of thinking like me, thinking about what could go wrong. How do we plan for those things that could go wrong, right? You also have to think about someone that's great with customer service. Sometimes when I'm tunnel vision and focused, I'm not ready to talk to people. I don't want to stop and take pictures. So I have about 2 or 3 people that evening. If anything goes wrong, if people want to talk to me, I need you to go and smile and talk to them and network with them. So you still all of us are planners, but you still have to kind of have those front people that can be the face of the event, right? If they just really need to talk to somebody and they're excited, they want to give feedback, you have those people in place as well. And then lastly, I've learned you have to have a breakdown team. So there are just some people right now that want to learn the back background of the events, right? So break it down with those pieces that we put together in the daytime, the production piece, the ones that are behind the scenes with the clipboards all night, you see them walking around. They like the technical parts of an event. So all of us together make the perfect team for an event.
Got you. Now, let's maybe transition into, as I mentioned earlier, you were recognized in the Black Enterprise. In essence, you created a few signature or a lot of events actually over the last 2 to 3 years, but there's been a few
Yes.
signature events that have really helped you transition from this, event planner to just this mega superstar event planner. And
Right.
but I really want to talk about just some of those events, and maybe let's start with Black Restaurant Week, and tell us just more about what that is and what came. How did the concept come about?
Sure. And that is my baby. That's my pride and joy. What I said earlier, Memphis Black Restaurant Week was purely a passion project. It was about uplifting Black restaurants, getting them some notoriety in the city. Memphis, we're really big on festivals and food. So we have, an Italian festival, Jewish festival, Indian festival. We've got all these amazing things around food, downtown dining week, but there was nothing in our community. But to kind of backtrack and bring you even to that forefront, um, pretty much as I was learning my way in the city of Memphis, connecting with other Black businesses, kind of creating friendships, I found that I love to know the face of every restaurant owner. Again, in my volunteer capacity, any Black business owner that I met, even if they didn't have a brick and mortar, I made it my business to support them, to bring them new business. Well, back in, it was November 2012. No, excuse me, November 2015. Chef Fran Mosley, really good friend of mine, she was selling cupcakes out of her car, not just regular cupcakes. These are sweet and savory cupcakes. Like she had a pizza cupcake, a meatball cupcake. She had one where it was fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and collard greens in a cupcake. So, I mean, really unique cupcakes. She decided to start a brick and mortar. She took her life savings, Joe, from her 9 to 5. She was doing the cupcakes on the side. She took all of her money. Her and her husband opened up HM Dessert Lounge. And so it was desserts, it was her savory foods. It was a lot of amazing things in one. And that opened November 2015. She asked me to be her social media manager. I said, well, you know what? I can take pictures of food, no problem. And that was kind of the culture of Instagram, where people wanted pictures of food to kind of drive business. And so the first 2 weeks when she opened, Joe, it was wall to wall traffic, people just coming in saying, I want to sow a seed, I want to give you money. I can't even stay to eat, but I'm so proud of you, excited for her. After 2 weeks, it was crickets. I'm there trying to take pictures, but I mean, Joe, it may have been 5 people a day. So immediately I said, okay, Fran, after about another 2 weeks of that, I said, well, let's take some of your money. Let's get some marketing dollars. Let's get you on the radio. Let's get you in print. And I'll never forget, Joe, she looked at me and she said, Cynthia, I've spent my life savings in this restaurant. I have nothing else to give. And it was in that moment that I realized that's why every Black restaurant is a hidden treasure. They don't have the money to market to compete with chain restaurants. That's why you always hear about it. It's word of mouth. It's never, I read about this restaurant. I saw this advertisement. And in that moment, as I said before, we have all these food festivals. I thought, well, there needs to be something around Black restaurants. At this time, I had a lot of favorites in the city. And just I don't try to do things over the top. I thought, you know what, we're in Memphis, Black restaurants, let's add week to it to kind of make it synonymous. We have downtown dining week. It's going to be a week long. Let's do Memphis Black Restaurant Week. Another challenge, I will tell you, in approaching a lot of the Black restaurants that were my favorites, when I told them about this idea, at the time I said, just give me $250. That's going to help me, number one, make it look like a real thing. Branding is very important. A website, posters, t-shirts. It still needs to look like something. I don't want it to just be like a bootleg flyer. So when I'm telling a Black restaurant, hey, I'm Cynthia Daniels, I'm one of your favorite customers. I know you don't know me. Just started kind of event planning on the side, but I want to help your restaurant grow. I want to bring in new customers for $250. And when I said $250, it was like, oh, you're trying to scam me. Look, I would say little girl, but young lady, I don't even know you like that. I mean, you don't need, why I need to give you money. And it was a little jarring. If I didn't hear, I don't want to give you that kind of money, it was, well, we don't really want people to know we're black owned. But when I come in, I'm hearing R&B. I see everybody in the back black cooking, but they might have somebody else representing in the front of the house, if you know what I mean. So in the beginning, I wanted 30 restaurants. I ended up with 8. I was happy to get those 8. That meant 8 businesses that didn't know me personally believed enough in an idea that I had to say, you know what, if I give you $250 to invest in the marketing, if I can get 100 extra people that week, clearly that was worth my investment, right? Joe, I had a pretty decent social media following. This was, I decided to launch March 2016. Memphis has crazy weather. You know, it could have been Black History Month, but it's always cold in Memphis. And I know we don't come out when it's cold. So decided to do the first week of March when spring is kind of peaking out. As soon as I started marketing it, people got excited. They said a Black you using the word Black. We're 67% African American populated in the city of Memphis. They had never seen the word Black used in an event. So the buzz was already there. And I thought, okay, if we can get that 100 plus an extra 100, if we can get 200 people to eat at these 8 restaurants for 7 days, oh, we got something smoking. Joe, I would never forget that first day, that Monday, my social, and I'm at work, I'm in my cubicle. My social media timeline was flooded with food, pride, people excited about this experience. I could not believe the amount of support, and it was something just needed at the time. By the end of that week, Joe, not only did we get those 200 customers, we had 3,500 people, purely social media campaign that supported. $85,000 was spent
Wow.
in 1 week. Every restaurant quadrupled what they typically make in 1 week. On the business side, I thought, I made none of that money, right?
You're right.
So that was kind of the moment where I said, maybe I need to do this full time. I mean, imagine had I been doing it full time. This was just a passion project to help bring them business. And just a testimonial at the end of that week, Joe, when people were giving me their numbers, I mean, just the emotions of, I felt like I owned a real restaurant. I've never had that much business before. I had people that reinvested in their businesses. They bought catering vans. I had another customer that was able to move into a bigger location, put a deposit down on that. Uh, some of the waitresses told me they were getting new apartment furniture. I mean, they made that much in tips. So I just knew I had something. The fact that Black Enterprise caught wind of it, even, Essence Magazine, that this young lady was selfless enough to create something for the Black community. So every year, it pretty much doubled in numbers to the point where by the 4th year, we brought in $1 million in the Black community. And I help people understand, yes, you're just spending $15 for lunch or $25 for dinner, but you're investing in a community. You are helping that restaurant sustain their company. And people just started to understand, not do we support that week, but this is a year-long thing. So people became more intentional about where they had their lunch meetings, doing little private parties and private events. It just became this movement around supporting a Black restaurant, and it was okay to be Black. And people that weren't Black, non-minorities came in and supported, because other press picked up everything. They're like, oh, I didn't even know this existed. Of course you didn't, because you're in a whole different community. You don't know about these hidden treasures. So it just really cross-populated. It brought in new residual customers, and it's just taken a life of its own.
Wow, that is truly powerful, and I think that is just a testament to your vision and
Thank you.
leadership. What has this event taught you about just Black economic empowerment?
I'm gonna take you back to the Obama campaign, if I could do that for a second. When Barack Obama first came on the scene, he said, if everybody can give me $5, right, put that towards my campaign. It was something that was unheard of. People felt like they were part of something. And I think that's what Black Restaurant Week has done. Even if you can't go every day of the week, whatever food you ate was just an investment back in that restaurant. So it helped people understand the power of being small but mighty when being able to be part of that economic impact in a community.
Wow. And I love the fact that you also have some of the data. I
Yeah.
think this is one of the key areas that I think as business owners embrace more of the data and the analytics and understanding how to
Yes.
make certain moves or decisions based on it to help enhance the business. I
Yeah.
think that's key. You went from 85K to $1 million over a 3 to 4 year period for these business
Yes.
owners. And that is tremendous. And I think being able to understand some of the data and how you're driving that, not only
Right.
will it help these business owners when they go and try to secure funding or bring in other partners, because they can then quantify the
Yeah.
return on investment. And so I think that that is tremendous. What One of the things, I do have a question is, as you have been working with business owners, what have you learned about the needs that these business owners face?
The needs that they face are kind of daunting depending on which restaurant it could be. So I found a lot of the more historical restaurants. So you've got the Four Way. The Four Way is the most historical restaurant in the city of Memphis. It's basically where all the civil rights leaders met during the 60s, Dr. King. You've had, Isaac Hayes, Elvis. A lot of people historically have eaten at this restaurant. Unfortunately, between different leaders, that they weren't able to keep up with technology. So right now, I'm working with the daughter of the person that was one of the founders, and she's come in. She's younger, so she's bringing technology in place. But before, I think they were left in a dark age. We're still using paper, nothing electronic, cash only. Orders are just taking too long. I don't think there were a lot of systems in place. So I've learned that the front of the house and management, it needs to be somebody that's business savvy. So that's one of the things I've noticed. And not to just say for Four Way, there was a difference between when I first approached them and kind of adding them later on into Black Restaurant Week. You have some restaurants that only hire their family. We all love to support our family, but that doesn't mean our family needs to work for us. You have to treat them like any qualified employee, not just, well, so and so, they're on a hard time right now, so we're just trying to get them, some money in their pocket. You can't operate like that. It has to be like a business. And lastly, I think you can't be afraid of change. You've got, Uber Eats, you've got DoorDash, you got all of these food apps that are out there now. A lot of the restaurants, to me, I'm not a restaurant owner, but I feel like some money is better than no money. Yes, they take a percentage of the people that are ordering and picking up from your restaurant, but that's additional income. That's something you can take and invest, put that in a whole separate account. But they feel like, well, they're just trying to infringe on my business instead of thinking of it as someone who's getting you to different neighborhoods. So I think the mindset has to change when it comes to being a business. Day one can't look like year three. You have to evolve every year. And that's one of the things I've noticed with some of the restaurants.
Awesome. And a lot of times you mentioned where you mentioned during the event, you had a lot of people that were, coming into the restaurants and it was like, I didn't know this was Black owned, or they started to see people that were not of the Black and brown community that were also
Yeah.
patronizing these restaurants as well. What do you think Black businesses can continue to do? Because there's always these stigmas that come up. They don't have customer service, or the service is bad, or the quality is not there. How do you think businesses can overcome some of those stereotypes that sometimes, unfortunately, which is probably not always the case? How do you think they can overcome some of these stereotypes so people can continue to ensure that they're providing the right level of business services for their customers, but also ensuring that they can continue to maintain continuity in their business?
I gotta preface this with, I absolutely love my Black restaurants. I love the relationships we've had and the trust they've given me. One thing I've seen consistently is the lack of training on the front end. So I don't see operation manuals. I don't see training manuals. It's literally, okay, you're hired. When can you start? This is how much you're going to make. And they kind of throw you in. And, if I can mention Chick-fil-A, I think we all know consistently across the board, whichever one you go to, you're going to get the same customer experience. If you're not taught this day one, if you're taught, okay, just take orders, this is how you take the money, you're not taught how to interact with customers, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with things when the order's not right, if something's missing. That's what's lacking in a lot of restaurants. When I think about that stigma of, but this, it's going to be bad customer service. Typically, it's because the waitresses and the waiters and the staff aren't prepared. They're not trained. And I wish they would take the time to slow down. It's because they're wearing so many hats, Joe. I personally feel like nobody ever had the time to sit down and write out the manual. If get the money, let's get this thing built, let's start cooking food so we can make our money back. Nobody thinks about the operation, so it is sustainable in the long run. So I think there's room for growth in that space. I know there are food consultants are kind of an up and coming business. A lot of food scientists are even kind of getting in that realm, but it's also being open to investing in those, knowing that you have to pay an expert to come in and help too.
Yeah. And do you see maybe opportunities similar to what you're doing with some of the universities as you're taking and going and working with the hospitality
Mhm.
universities and colleges or programs to get internships and is that an opportunity where maybe some of these restaurants can maybe leverage interns to bring them in where they actually have the formal training
Mhm.
around some of these types of elements around customer service? If you think about schools like Johnson and Wells, they train
Mhm.
people on how to be hospitality professionals, and that means servers,
Mhm.
cooks, those types of things. So maybe
Right.
there's an opportunity
Yeah.
where maybe you can help bring in some of the learnings you're having with your business with these
Mhm.
interns and helping them maybe get integrated into some of
Mhm.
these restaurants. And it also then could play twofold, giving these students hands-on experience on how to
Absolutely.
transition into the hospitality industry at all, as well as giving these restaurants staff that they can potentially have as full-time employees, but also bring a certain level of training that
Right.
you mentioned that they can apply and help enhance some of these business. And there's multitude of roles that these,
Right.
these students can play. So that may be something to think about as
I never thought
you
about
continue
that.
to
No, I will
bring those.
absolutely look into that, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, as we kind of close out on this one, so Black Restaurant Week happened in Memphis and started in Memphis, but it also expanded outside of Memphis as well. So maybe
It
tell us more
has.
about that experience and how
Sure.
were you able to expand this and have these in multiple cities across the U.S.?
Sure. So, of course, I told you guys, restaurants brought in $85,000. I didn't get any of that percentage because it wasn't about that seriously at the time. But I thought, okay, if I can create this model in other cities around the country, I can really have something, right? So again, being part of the Urban League network, I have national connections. So people in different cities, my plan in 2017 was to roll out 10 cities. A lot of things were happening at that time that I wasn't aware of, right? So I got this national recognition for my inaugural week. So a lot of people got an idea to create in their own cities. I didn't think about intellectual property, trademarking, anything of that nature. It was, okay, I got this national recognition, but it's still mine. So the next year, I thought I'll roll out 10 cities. Out of the 10, only 3 cities were successful. And successful because some of the people just weren't as passionate as me. I thought if I can do it kind of in that volunteer space, right? If I'm passionate about it, I can pay a sales team in this city and that city. But that plan didn't really come to fruition. But out of the 3 cities, there's one, Richmond, that has a very successful Black Restaurant Week. And they've actually rebranded theirs to Richmond Black Restaurant Experience. And that is because they wanted to stand alone with their brand, which absolutely made sense because you also just had, and what I wanted to do, Joe, was have a consistent brand, in terms of what it looked like, what the model was. But at the same time, you have other organizations, other people that decided to trademark it themselves. create a whole different buzz around it. And so it almost looks more of a corporate thing. It doesn't look like at the end of the day, this is really helping the restaurant owner. It looks more like, let me get these national sponsors so I can put some money in my pocket. And it just looks a lot different than what the brand that I created here in Memphis. So I only do the Memphis one now. I know, again, Richmond is very successful. I've had a few cities reach out to me and I've consulted with them to help them know how to do it in a sense. But at the end of the day, I'm happy that the root of it is helping Black restaurants and bringing awareness around it at the end of the day.
Got you. And with the restaurants that you started out with in Memphis, have you been able to track their success since you kicked off Black Restaurant Week in Memphis? And how are they doing today?
You know, I would like to say that most of them are doing very well. I saw again a lot of them branching out into catering. You know, being able to add that as an extension of their restaurants. A lot of them able to hire more staff full time. That's something I didn't mention before, Joe. But to have enough money to hire more people, that's the blessing of it all. A lot of them, honestly, though, in the midst of the pandemic, I don't think anybody prepared for that, right? Nobody knew it was coming. So to have to either temporarily close or having to go to only curbside, I know that a lot of them took a huge hit. But the city, knowing how important Black restaurants are now, I will say we brought enough attention there that they've been able to give them a lot of funding to make sure that they can still sustain, during the pandemic. But I honestly, in the height of Black Restaurant Week, we saw absolutely a lot of growth.
Awesome. No, that is tremendous. I just love the impact that this event is driving. Even as you expand to different cities, it's still creating Black entrepreneurship. It's still supporting these Black-owned businesses, which also helps reinvest those dollars back into those Black communities. And then I think it also exposes these restaurants to people that are outside of the Black and brown community. And I think a
Yeah,
lot of people really can see that they can go and get these experiences and have customers that are outside of their normal customer base while still staying true to their
sure.
community, but it also helps them to continue to expand their business, their impact, but also just ensuring that they can continue to help expand and grow their business as
Right.
well. So that's awesome. There was another event I just wanted to maybe touch on,
Okay.
and it's the Top 40 Under 40 in Memphis. You created this event, and it's really to help celebrate Black excellence in the city. So
Mhm.
tell us about that event and what has it taught you about Black excellence and why we should celebrate it?
Absolutely. So I got to tell you the story behind it too, if I may. So top 40 under 40, that number one, that's a national brand. That's nothing new under the sun. Everybody has those events. And there is a list in Memphis. Every year, there's usually 3 to 5 African American professionals that are celebrated. I've, nominated a few people, and I noticed again, I mean, not to say that you're supposed to pick people because it's Cynthia Daniels recommending, but I just know that I'm putting stellar people in comparison to the non-Black and brown people. It just doesn't add up. So I think in the back of my mind that always bothered me, but I didn't think to do anything about it, right? So the idea came, Joe, my first committee meeting, my volunteer meeting for Memphis Black Restaurant Week. When I had this idea back in February, I was just my first volunteer meeting, and that at the time was my friends. Hey, we got to hang up posters in these parts of town. We had a street team put out these flyers. This was a Saturday morning at one of the restaurants. In the midst of me giving my friends these orders, I just had a surreal moment of, wow, these are some amazing people to trust this crazy idea that I have, not knowing that it'll work, and they're rock stars in their professions. In the midst of me telling them these orders, Joe, I stopped. I said, hey guys, once I finish Memphis Black Restaurant Week, I'm going to do a top 40 under 40 gala because I want to celebrate some of you all and some of the deserving people in the city. And they looked at me like, what is she talking about? Cynthia, you so crazy, girl. Okay, but that was locked in my mind, Joe. So Memphis Black Restaurant Week, it goes off without a hitch. So March of 2016, I mean, the city knows Cynthia Daniels at this point. I worked with the same guy that branded my Memphis Black Restaurant Week. We got together, put together the 40 under 40 logo. In my mind, I said, if Diddy came to Memphis and threw a black tie gala, that's what I want this experience to be like. Got that together, put it out there in the public in April to just say, I'm going to honor and celebrate 40 people in the city of Memphis. We're going to do nominations in June. I'm going to make them public in August. We're going to do the event, a Black Tie Gala, in November. Again, thinking about weather. Weather's important to me as a planner. I knew I wanted people to fly. You know, I pinned the hashtag Black Tie Fly. I knew I wanted, fly coats and gowns and tuxes. So I said, yeah, November is nice, crisp, cold weather. Talked to a venue. The venue accommodated 350 people. Again, I've never fundraised and planned a gala, but I knew what I wanted it to look like. So when I make this thing public in April, I mean, you could feel the shock of the city. Who is this Black girl creating a Black gala with Black excellence? Black tie required? Memphis doesn't do that. So it was already, I'm breaking up the norm. Like, I felt she has the audacity to do this. But at the same time, you had people, I could feel them cheering like, thank you. Somebody knows we are worthy of being celebrated. That is more than 3 to 5 of us every year. So Joe, I am trying to, in the nicest way, brand this event. Again, there's that undercurrent of people in Memphis don't do black tie. They don't know what that means. So I'm putting pictures out, jewel tones. I'm putting pictures of Diddy. Like, I am preparing them for this night because I need you to understand the excellence that's in. You haven't seen this yet, but you got to get ready, right? The gala sells out in 2 weeks, Joe. The tickets went on sale July 1st. And I figured, okay, between July and November, I'm confident enough in myself and my following that I could sell 350 tickets by then. 2 weeks later, it's sold out. Not now person is even nominated, let alone accepted. But the idea that there is somebody creating something needed in this community, I was like, oh snap, it's getting real. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I do have big nerves. There's this the Regional One Gala. It's a $600 ticket gala. It's the cream of the crop. I never been, I only heard about it. I said, but whoever, and I've seen pictures, whoever does the AV and sets up the production for Regional One, I want that for my gala. Now, I didn't know how much it cost, but I knew the vision I had, and it was just so plain as day, Joe. Like, I had to do this. So I reached out to them. We go to the venue, we walk around. I never asked the price. I just told them what I wanted. Because, when God is giving you this vision, you just have to do it. Gave me a quote the next day. It said $11,000. I said, oh, okay, where do I sign? I mean, I was just that convicted, like, this thing is happening. And I still have a full-time job when I'm doing this, right? But I just knew if I fail, if I don't have enough money, I can take it out my savings if needed. So this gala happens. I'm telling them in the branding, we start on time because the other stereotype, Joe, we don't start on time. I'm telling them 6:30, the doors open. And 75% of the people believe me. They were there. So when the doors opened, to watch people's faces as they walked in, because of course it was decked out. I had the lighting, beautiful decor, centerpieces that almost reached the ceiling. I mean, I felt like this has to happen. And I'll tell you something too about the sponsors that came into play. So it was paid for. But people walked in and they literally were saying, oh, this is a real event. This is a real gala. Like, I'm hearing the whispers and the people are in furs. I mean, they brought out everything. I mean, just to see the beautiful faces, because you don't get that opportunity in Memphis. If you go to someone else's gala, 10% of the room looks like you and you're kind of in the corner. But this was everybody decked out, right? My family flew in from Atlanta. It was a beautiful night. It still didn't set into me, Joe, that I had done something unprecedented in the city. It wasn't until the very end of the night I talked to a radio host who was my MC. She says, flawless event, dinner. We awarded 40 people. We showed 40 videos of them speaking, like 30-second increments. We had entertainment twice. Joe, I got all this done in under 2 hours. People were just in awe. And the host said, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Cynthia Daniels. This was her first gala. And I remember sitting there like, dang, this is my first gala. And it was perfect. Did a little after party at the end because I know, okay, first of all, it's Diddy themed. But if you're going to celebrate and be fly, like you still got to release and have fun afterwards. So that sent a wave through the city. And Joe, we're now at the fifth one. And I'll tell you two things. So number one, that same publication that typically honored 3 to 5 people. By the time I did my third gala, they started doing 19 and 20. So the culture shift happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go back to sponsorship, again, not knowing how I would pay for it, but thinking the tickets should kind of keep me in the green. I had two very wealthy African Americans reach out to me. I don't know how they found my number, but they got people. They both called me within the first week of me making my announcement to say, we want to be a title sponsor. I want to be a presenting sponsor. So I knew I had a cushion, but I still, had to offset and sell this thing to other people. But because the city felt like it was needed at the end of the day, I just had their support from year one. So now it's almost like a fraternity where people feel like they are committed. I connect them with people. We've done 4. So you have a network of that many people, 160 professionals that can say, well, you're a physician, great, I need to come to you. You're an entrepreneur, great. I mean, people that have just never felt appreciated. So it's beautiful to do that just from an idea.
Wow. I mean, that is awesome. And I think when you're doing great work and you start to put yourself out there and it's really about helping others and not self-interest,
Right.
people invest in you and they will want to be a part of those things. As you mentioned earlier, people just want to be a part of something big. But why do you think the reception in Memphis was the way was so strong for this? Why do you think that was the case? Because you mentioned that this is something that a lot of people never saw in Memphis, or they never thought that
Mm-hmm.
people would be receptive to it. Why do you think the reception has been so strong?
Again, like I mentioned before, I think subconsciously people feel suppressed. I can be great. I can be a leader in the community. I can be great in my job as a Black professional, but there's this ceiling here. I really do want to be celebrated. So the Mecca at the time was making that other list. If I make that other list, I'm really doing something. But they didn't know that they could create it themselves. They felt like, well, I need permission before I can do this and that. And me, I'm coming in as a disruptor from Atlanta. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. It's that simple. And if I'm gonna give you another example real quick. The caterer. I used one of the guys that was honored the first year was an actual caterer. So of course I wanted to use his company, Desmond D. Arthur's Catering. The operations person, we did a walkthrough of the venue the week of, just some last minute, okay, this is the dinner time, this is X, Y, and Z. And she says, hey, so I've never even asked, what's the mission of this night? I said, oh, well, the mission is to celebrate 40 African Americans in the city of Memphis. Okay. And I still saw confusion. She says, okay, well, but why are you doing it? Oh, because I wanted to celebrate 40 people. And she just looked at me like, so you just decided you were going to create this event to celebrate 40 people? And in that moment, I realized, to me, what seemed so normal to someone else was so much bigger than they could have ever imagined. They think they have to wait for somebody else to do it. some other organization, some other publication. They couldn't do it in their own communities for themselves. So even in that moment, and that kind of happened throughout the process, like, so no, who's in charge? I'm in charge. But like, who is your boss? That's some organization. It's me, Cynthia Daniels and Company bank account is paying for this. I if this is a norm in DC, Dallas, Atlanta, it was something about Memphis where they didn't know they could have something like this.
Wow, that is awesome. So the 40 people, when you
Mm-hmm.
choose or you select the 40 on the 40,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things that you see that stand out about the people who are selected as the 40 under 40? Because I think when you start to think about Black excellence or just people that are doing well, there's always some of these common traits and
Yeah.
attributes that they have. But what are some of the things that stand out about the people that are selected for the 40 under 40?
Sure. Honestly, it's a very simple application, but it's what's written about the person that's important. So I like to know their community involvement, because I've already had my boots on the ground in a sense. I know what organizations really need help that makes people selfless when they volunteer. I like to people to tell a story. Tell me in 500 words why this person is deserving. I also wanted to honor non-traditional people, right? So I know people are listening to this podcast. Some may see it, but I have this picture behind me of Memphis legend, 8 Ball and MJG. So an artist, someone in the art space, they typically don't get celebrated in that sense. And I made sure, I think year 3 or 4, this artist, Jamon Bullock, was awarded. So people that are also in those non-traditional roles, I think you always think, okay, if this person has this job title, then they get an award. And I wanted to make sure, again, entrepreneurs, people in healthcare, they typically don't get awards. RNs, doctors, firefighters, they're still Black excellence. Just because they're not in the white collar space, they still deserve to be at the table. So it's a daunting process there. I mean, Joe, year 1, I had over 600 applications, and there are only 40 people chosen. So I always have a committee of people over the age of 40. So it's, non-biased, and we go through these and we talk about the stories and their impact and what they've done in the city of Memphis. I even, again, because it's my event, I can do what I want to do, add my own rules. Every year I try to honor 5 people outside of the city of Memphis. They're from Memphis, but they're doing things great in other cities. So I've been able to honor Carlene Roy with Vanity Group. She started as an intern with Diddy. Now she has her own event planning company. Got Patrick Henry. He started, just went to LA with no money. He's like a designer now for Gabrielle Union, Dwayne Wade, John Legend, Kirk Franklin. Again, people that typically don't get celebrated. We've got Ben Corey Jones. He's a writer for Insecure. Once they leave Memphis, they love Memphis, but they don't think they'll ever be celebrated. So they come back even more excited to say, I'm coming back for an award. So it's just been a cool process.
Wow, that is tremendous, and I know you have several other events and experiences that you're creating, but I think those are the two that I know have really helped propel you into this next spectrum of community leader, entrepreneur, etc. And I think these are two tremendous events. I still need to get to the 40 under 40, so whenever the world opens back up, I got to get to
Oh,
Memphis.
you are my
Good
VIP.
time.
You are at my table next to me. Absolutely.
Okay, very good. So maybe let's maybe shift and let's think about future forward as we prepare or as you prepare for the new year. What are some of the projects that you have in
Mhm.
store that you're working on?
Sure. So honestly, right now I have pivoted into the virtual space. So I'm doing some things with different organizations in terms of helping them create their own virtual spaces. So I've kind of created this whole coaching aspect of Cynthia Day and the company. While I can't physically do events, I can teach you how to do virtual events yourself. Working with the Memphis Grizzlies on a few projects. They've trusted me to create an HBCU experience for them. So we're trying to figure out next year. The NBA got it right. The NBA was able to create this bubble. So we're going to try to figure out how to do some really cool things next year. And even just in the virtual space, you know, Joe, we've all been in the house for the most part since March. So I decided again, I just, as you can see now, I get an idea and I just run with it. I don't even take the time to write it out. I just go. And I said, there needs to be some type of virtual New Year's Eve celebration. It's important that as we go into this next year, things may not change overnight, but we still have to celebrate life. We're still here. We've made it thus far through the midst of so many people that are no longer here. So why not still create this Black excellence, this fly event where people can dress up in their homes, they can pop their bottles, do whatever, but they know on TV that they're going to have the best DJ, they're going to have a live entertainment experience. So it still keeps the Cynthia Daniels and Company brand going, even though it's not the typical events that I do in person.
Got you. And so you mentioned the virtual element. Are you also looking, particularly as we start to get a little bit more freedom, not freedom, but just a little bit more capacity to roam and
Mhm.
travel? Are you looking to expand events? You know, obviously Black Restaurant Week is one, but into
Sure.
other cities and planning
Mhm.
events. And you mentioned some of the coaching that you're doing.
Sure.
Are you trying to create more of those platforms outside of the city of Memphis?
So I think I feel very comfortable in the coaching space, being able to talk to the organizations, helping them recreate whatever experience they desire in their cities. For instance, I'm talking to a nonprofit in Connecticut, you know, that working on margaritas, some kind of a margarita spring festival, right? So I feel very comfortable just health wise to be able to do those things. But me trying to recreate a signature event in another city, you know, I think they're special because they're in Memphis. I do consider the things I do outside the norm, but Memphis, I think appreciates it on a completely different level. So I definitely try to keep things here at home. Now I will say there's an event that I do called Elixir. And I guess the goal in the end, I think it could go very well in other cities. So Elixir basically takes over an entire hotel. You've got 7 DJs, you've got 4 different rooms. Each room has their own theme. I think that could really get people excited in every city. But the supporting Black businesses, I really think that's something more now than ever that people are going to continue to do.
Wow, that is awesome. And so it sounds like with the coaching, is this almost where you're almost creating like a franchise of Cynthia Daniels and Company
Hmm.
event planning, where now you can put a platform together and a blueprint, and
Hmm.
then license it out. So is that kind of what you're thinking about, or could be something to be thinking
I
about?
might be thinking about it now, Joe. Thank you.
So that may be some things where you can think about how you can expand. But I love
Yeah,
the coaching element because, to your point, a lot of people don't understand the blueprint, and what you're doing can apply to planning a wedding,
yeah,
planning a gala, whatever the case may be. Particularly in these cities where you mentioned Atlanta, DC, New York, LA, you're just going to have people that
yeah,
can do this with this skill set. But when you get into these smaller cities that have great communities, but they just don't have the talent
yeah.
or the know-how to be able to do these types of things, could be a very unique opportunity for smaller markets to be able to help create these spaces, particularly when we talk about Black excellence. So love the work that you're doing to expand there. So as we come to the end of this episode, I usually I always leave the audience with three things before we go. So if you had three things that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up today, what are those three things?
Wow. So the 3 things I would tell anybody, if you're going to venture into the entrepreneur space, make sure that whatever you're doing as your side hustle, that you're making enough money to pay your bills before you take the big leap. Me personally, I just took the leap because I was so uncomfortable in my day job. It was just one of the worst days ever. I'd done the gala, I'd done Memphis Black Restaurant Week. So I just jumped with no safety net. So I absolutely recommend having some type of savings in place if you decide to go ahead and take that big leap. Secondly, listen to that inner voice. That inner voice is there for a reason. So whatever space you're in, don't let people talk you out of things. If again, me saying I want to do a 40 under 40 event that had never been done, the Black Restaurant Week, had I listened to the right people, neither one would have happened. So if you really have decided this is something you want to do, don't let anybody stop you. Take that risk. And I guess lastly, self-care is very important. Very early on as a professional, I experienced burnout because I went hard 24/7. You're never going to go harder for anybody other than yourself. But I also understood that you have to have an off button. So make sure you take time for self-care with whatever you're doing.
Wow. Thank you for those. So take a risk and bet on yourself, but then also making sure that you are taking care of yourself and creating the right um, forms to create the wellness so you can continue to do the great work. So thank you for that. And before we wrap up, tell us where to find you. How can we get in touch with you? Give you your social
Okay,
medias and your websites.
absolutely. So website is cdcoevents.com. So that's CDCO co cdcoevents.com. On Facebook, Cynthia Daniels and Company. And then on Instagram, Cyn Daniels 09.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Before I wrap up, I do want to maybe touch on one little thing that maybe people don't know about you. You have a somewhat of a hip hop career. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we close?
Are you really going to put me on the spot? Wow, I should have never confided in you, Joe. All right, really quickly, again, coming from Atlanta, my brother at the time, we're talking early 2000s, he was a producer. He's now great constructor, contractor, does great things. But at the time, he was producing the Attic Crew. And the Attic Crew, subsidiary, I guess, of T.I. I think we all know T.I. if you don't know the Attic Crew. And there's a song called Dope Boy Fresh. Well, I just so happened to come home the right weekend from college. I'm hey, big brother, what's going on? He says, and he had a studio in the basement. I'm so glad you're here. The girl that was supposed to do the hook couldn't make it. So we needed to do the hook. Now you're talking about someone that's very introverted at the time. And I'm saying it in a very articulate way. Dope boy fresh, dope boy fresh. And he's trying to, nah, I gotta put some twang on the shouty. So if you listen to Dope Boy Fresh, you will hear me on the hook and also saying, ooh, he's so fresh. And you gotta say fresh without the SH. So
Very good. No, thank you for that. I kid with you on it, but I think it's awesome. So when people think of Cynthia Daniels, not only is she the event extraordinaire, she's also deeply rooted in the Atlanta hip hop community, Outkast,
always.
T.I., and now it's Cynthia
Yes.
Daniels. So very good. So as we close out today's episode, I first want to thank Cynthia for joining us today and really sharing her unique experience in her business and what she's doing to really storytell and creating these unique experiences for her clients in event planning, but then also the impact that she's having in the Memphis community with Black Restaurant Week, but then also how she's celebrating Black excellence in that city. And so I want to thank Cynthia for sharing with us today. So as we close, I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and we will share Cynthia's information. So if you're in the need for an event planner, virtually or locally in Memphis, she is definitely the person to reach out to. And so as we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you.